There you go.
Oh, hey. Yeah.
All right, so welcome everybody. We have here Dr. Albert Wong, Director of Somatic Psychology at John F. Kennedy University, where he trains students from all over the world on how to use the wisdom of the body in psychotherapy. He helps clients and clinicians learn how to work through trauma, overcome stress, anxiety, and depression, have more fulfilling relationships, and reconnect with the body's wisdom. And he is here tonight to talk to us about many dances, one rhythm, finding the pulse that underlies the whole.
Oh,
Welcome, Albert.
yeah. Thanks so much, Tom. That's such a lovely introduction. It's sometimes funny to hear things said about myself. So thanks for being so generous. And it's great to see some familiar faces on the line and just connect with people all around the world. It's amazing. It's been an amazing, I don't know, 2 weeks, 10 days. It's gone by so quickly. And I feel like I know so many of you now. Your faces are familiar and your persons are familiar to me. So I think that's part of the theme here, kind of like, how do we interweave the many into one? Because there's something I think that's happening, and it's been happening over the course of these last several weeks, or 2 weeks or so, where there's been this kind of interweaving of humanity. And if you think of each of us having our own rhythm, our own dance, our own way of being, there's a way in which the many dances, the dance that lives in each of us, has become a one kind of thing. It's become kind of a unified sensibility. And so it's this is kind of an exploration in how that happens. How does this kind of one thing come out of many different rhythms, many different dances? So, I think about the field of embodiment and just some of the challenges that we face. And one of the things that I think is true is that we don't have enough kind of common places, common ground, common watering holes. And so it feels like many dances and many rhythms. Like there's lots of different people doing so many different things and often different worlds. And, sometimes there is no center. The center does not hold. And so this is really an exploration in how can we find the center again? How can we feel community again? How can we find that emergent quality that arises out of the many that comes into the one? Okay. Yeah, please go ahead and cook. It's neat to see kind of life all over the world. And I think kind of that's one thing that kind of has been really just touching. It's almost neat to get to peek into each of your lives a little bit, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I think there's people from all around the world. And, I think sometimes, oh, hey, good to see you. It's nice to see familiar faces. Yeah. So I think what would be nice is if we just kind of take a moment to try and start to feel the rhythm of the whole, the rhythm of the group, right? Because there's all of us in this space together, this kind of common area. And how can we start to learn to feel the rhythm that is us? So from all over the world, people are kind of tuning in. So I just want to take a moment, maybe we could take a moment and just feel where everybody is, like where you are, and just imagine for a moment. So if you want to, you can close your eyes. Your eyes can be open also. But just take a moment to feel the truth of where we are, that this voice is going out, spanning across the globe, and that there are people, one of which is you, kind of in your life, listening and connecting to other people who are around the world. Just see if you can feel the pulse of that, the sweetness of that, the truth of that, the connection that exists, even though that we're at a distance. Right? And just if you can, just imagine lines of energy just flowing as if circling the globe, stretching out, and maybe connecting us into a web, a one thing. Yeah. Yeah. So there's something significant that's happening, right? This kind of interweaving of consciousness. One of my teachers used to say that kind of the group field is what emerges kind of when we're relatively still and relatively quiet together. We really start to feel each other's presence, right? And so just inviting you to feel that emergent, whatever something that is, right? Mm. Yeah. So thank you for sitting with me kind of in that space for just a moment and connecting around the world. Yeah. So the what I'm going to talk about today is something, that's kind of a mixture of kind of my study. My background is originally, before I was a somatic person, I was a physicist, and there was kind of all of these ideas from the physics literature and language about connection and how things emerge out of connection. And so some of this is theoretically drawn on that, like how does something come out of nothing? How does kind of an emergent quality come out of separate parts, right? And how can that happen? And how does that inform our work as somatic people? And how can we help people kind of develop that quality of finding the deeper levels of themselves, deeper levels of connection. And once we find that connection, how can we hold on to it? How can it help us? Because one of the things that's true about connection in groups is that the stronger the group, the more it can withstand, right? And as we build our interconnections as a community and as a group, the more we'll be able to withstand, right? And if we get kind of shaken too much, that creates kind of a loss of rhythm sometimes, a loss of continuity. And, so this ebb and flow between finding our rhythm and kind of maintaining our self-connection and connection with the group is kind of of vital importance. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and start with some slides here. So hopefully it'll organize things so that I think it'll help us. So can everybody see that? Can people see that mostly? Okay. Hey, hey guys. I got my, it's nice to see some familiar voices here and students. Okay. So I'm assuming that people can see that. So basically, the title of this is Many Dances, One Rhythm, and finding the pulse that underlies the whole. All right. So this is what we're going to talk about today. This is hold on. This is the organization of it. All right. So first, it's just about kind of making contacts with ourselves and others, right? So feeling ourselves here and feeling kind of the strange world of interconnection that we're in, right? Connecting to others around the world. Okay. Then we're going to go into kind of at least my thoughts about one of the dilemmas in the field, right? That there's a lot of fracture within it, right? And how do we find the things that interconnect us rather than separate us? And I'll talk about 3 different axes of embodiment, right? 3 different ways in which we can organize the field of embodiment so that it doesn't feel so kind of fractured. I'll talk about something called the Gestalt cycle of experience. That's a way in which it seems like there's a theme that can run throughout many, many, many different modalities, something that can help tie things together and help organize the field into a functional whole. And then we're going to try to do some experiencing of the 3 axes and moving through the Gestalt cycle of experience, and then some integration and reflection, okay, and connection. So we just did this, connecting with us all, whoever we are, wherever we are in ourselves and around the world. You know, it's really remarkable that we're all gathered here in this shared space. So this is my sense of the field of somatics, and there's a lot. there's so much. It's really almost overwhelming sometimes. And as you see this kind of slide go on and on and on and on, I could keep on going, and I only stopped because everything got covered. But there's just so many different kind of elements kind of within somatics, and it feels almost unwieldy. Like there's so many different modalities, so many different brands. It's very confusing, and everybody has their own newest invention, you know. And you know, this is the work that I do professionally, and I've even listening to this conference, there's new things that I'm discovering, and it feels like new things are being discovered or invented or branded by the minute. And I think what we need is maybe something else. Kind of, we don't necessarily need more different modalities or more different names for modalities. We need more kind of integration, more ways of bringing things together. Okay. So that seems to be my assessment of the problem, that there's a lot of fragmentation within the field. That's not to say that there aren't kind of genuine differences between kind of domains of practice. There really are. But you know, there's such an incentive for people to differentiate themselves by brand. You know, there's such an economic incentive to claim yourself as separate or different or special or unique, or having the secret sauce that nobody else has, that, you know, everybody else is doing the wrong thing. That it really creates kind of a sense of kind of incentivizing separateness as opposed to togetherness, you know. And so difference is over incentivized, right? That's my sense of things. And kind of the uniqueness of practice is emphasized and the commonalities are overlooked. So the field sometimes feels like it becomes a little split apart, right? And disconnected from each other. So the embodiment field becomes fragmented, and it feels like a broken picture, right? If the field of embodiment were its own body, it would not be listening to itself, right? You'd have one part that might not be attending to another or even knowing what another part is doing, right? It wouldn't be an organized whole. It wouldn't be kind of a one thing. It would be kind of at a more primitive level of organization. So, and I think we're at a stage now, I think in this conference is one of the pieces of it, where we can maybe begin to start to find an organizing synthesis of these many modalities, the one rhythm that kind of unites many of these different practices. So how do we find kind of the pulse that unites the whole? How do we find kind of these patterns, right? Okay. So first notion is just some organizing ways, like putting things in different places, right? So there's three axes that I'm going to talk about that I think are really foundational and fundamental to thinking about the field of somatic psychology. So the one that most of you have heard about probably in the world of embodiment is these notions of bottom up and top down, right? So so bottom up is this idea of okay, I'm just checking out the chat messages there. So bottom up is this notion that kind of you're listening to your body. What is your body saying? What are the messages that it's giving to you, right? And if you can listen to those messages, kind of those messages that are coming from within, from the felt sense, from the experience of just listening and attending very carefully to what's happening, then you're listening to something that's kind of almost emerging from the underneath. So it feels like something that's coming upwards from the bottom, almost like bubbling upwards from within. And so you probably, if you're around the field long enough, and most of you have probably heard of this term, kind of things that come from the bottom up, from the base, from the belly, from your body, from the felt experience, from something kind of soft and kind of forming inside you, this place that really kind of doesn't have words, but speaks in this kind of almost primary experience way, right? So things come from the bottom up, the messages that come from the body, what the body wants to say to us. Okay? And then we have kind of things that come from the top down, kind of the messages that come from above, right? Maybe the message that we give to ourselves from our minds, right? The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And in somatic, sometimes there's a negative connotation to this, but it can also be quite positive, right? You can have top-down messages that are really good. You can have top-down intuitions, right? Kind of if you have a connection with spirituality or source or something that's higher than yourself, you know, sometimes if you connect to the world of dreams, you can have a deep sense of something coming almost from above or from the top that gets slowly incorporated into your body or your being, right? So kind of, you know, there's bottom-up approaches and top-down approaches, and that's one primary mechanism. So you can think of this as almost a vertical, the vertical dimension of embodiment and somatics, right? This is the way in which kind of things can be, if this isn't working, you can get split from your body and your mind, right? That's kind of something that's dangerous that we don't want to have happen. But if it's flowing, then your vertical axis is going well, right? And you know, you can think of like kind of classic bottom-up processes, things like, I don't know if these terms are familiar to people or not, but those of you in the field, I imagine you've heard of focusing or the felt sense. These are kind of classic somatic psychology kind of terms, like listening to kind of the feelings inside, right? So that's classic somatic psychology. And then top down would be something like, you know, there's all these practices like affirmation. So if you say an affirmation and just let it settle into your body, right? Like even just feeling the words like, you are a good person, or I am a good person, and just letting yourself feel that inside you, that can be really just a top-down approach, just letting it settle in, like having an idea, thought, and just letting it settle into your body, or having a sense of being called to something through spirit and letting that kind of start to become manifest inside you, right? So the world of affirmations is a top-down approach, right? Kind of a certain, there's even cognitive behavioral therapy where you have the thoughts and then let that work its way into your system. That can be a top-down approach. You know, sometimes the way CBT works, it's just a top-only approach, but so there's kind of, but you know, you can use CBT in a kind of a top-down way. And then dream work, and then transpersonal psychology, the psychology of psyche and spirit, and helping spirit reconnect with the psyche, right? So those are kind of, that's one axis, a vertical axis within embodiment, okay? And, you know, I think this could be just a way of bringing it home in terms of practice, right? Just thinking inside yourself, like if your body had a voice, what might it want to say right now, you know? And that would be kind of the bottom, you know, the body coming forward and up. And, you know, kind of, and if you were a kind, compassionate self, right, kind of what might you want to say in response to your body, okay? So that would be kind of a top-down approach, speaking to your body, thinking a thought or having a thought and letting it work its way into your body, okay? So that's kind of a basic kind of practice. Now, the other axes, hold on. Okay, so there's also an axis that I'll call this the horizontal axis. And this is kind of outside in and inside out, okay? So, you know, and this is less commonly thought of in terms of somatics. But if you think of kind of outside in, right? And what can you take in from the outside world into your body and into your experience? So if you think of things like ecotherapy, you know, so ecotherapy is this notion of like if you immerse yourself in the natural world and you kind of do things like forest bathing or go out into nature and let the wind blow against your face, or the beauty of the ocean just penetrate into your body and your being, right? There's a way in which you're letting the outside world into your body, letting the body of the world, the Gaia that is healthy and natural and beautiful, penetrate into you, right? So you're letting the outside come into you, right? And so there's all these different modalities, which sometimes we think of as maybe somatic and sometimes not, but I think it's a very important axis, this kind of horizontal axis, right? So ecotherapy, forest bathing, there's lots of relational therapy models. If you're just with a loving human being, right, and you let their body penetrate into yours, just kind of in terms of their energy, right, their loving energy coming into you, you're doing some real important work of letting the outside come in, right? And so this is a very important dimension as well of kind of embodiment and psychotherapy and finding kind of organizing things, right? So music, I think one of the reasons why music is so popular is that it actually has therapeutic value, right? We can let things in that way. So there's that dimension of outside in. And then, there's the direction of inside out, right? So you can get kind of cut off sometimes from your capacity to express yourself. And so, there's things like expressive arts work. So there's this whole domain of embodiment, which is all about kind of expressing yourself and getting whatever is happening inside out of you and putting it into the world. And so both channels are important to be able to receive and to be able to express, right? So those are important axes. And so kind of a simple practice around this might be, right, if your body had an impulse to do something in relation to its environment right now, what might that be? If you were thirsty, kind of getting a drink, right? So, that would be a natural impulse. If you wanted a hug, getting a hug. So all of these are ways of letting the outside in, right? And then kind of letting yourself be nourished by your environment. Okay, so that's kind of that axis. All right, and then another important axis is kind of a chronological axis. And so this is kind of past to present and present to past. This is frequently like there's all kinds of work around like inner child work or revisiting kind of moments in the past in order to heal the past, right? And bring a certain kind of present-centered loving kindness and resourcing into our past history and our past life. And listening for that capacity to bring these two together, right? Because one of the things that happens during trauma is that things get fractured, right? All of these axes that I've been talking about, the kind of the vertical, the horizontal, and the chronological can get punctured by trauma, right? Kind of our vertical axis of the body and the mind kind of gets split when trauma occurs. Like that axis stops kind of cohering, right? There's a tearing between the body and the mind, right? Or there's relationally, our inside and out. Like if we've experienced trauma, like we stop being able to relate or interrelate, right? And sometimes with trauma, kind of things get frozen in time. The past and the present become kind of isolated from each other. They get kind of cordoned off or frozen and disconnected. And so kind of working the chronological axis in both directions. So going back and retrieving kind of past history that might have gotten kind of put, See you, Constance. Yeah. Going away and kind of having past history that's been like cut off and shunted away. That can be kind of something that we need to reintegrate kind of after an experience of trauma. Or, finding ways of kind of connecting, like things happen in the present and we don't know why. We get super anxious about going to the doctor, and we don't really understand why, but maybe something happened in our past that kind of explains that. Maybe kind of we were left kind of at a doctor's office when we were a kid, you know, and never got over it. Okay. So finding that those reconnections is really important. So that this chronological axis, and so just to organize things, so things like psychodynamic psychotherapy or linking the inner child with past resources, or things like EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. These are kind of techniques that kind of combine past and present, or present to past would be things like linking implicit memories, right? Kind of the body sensations that are here living in our body in the present, but which actually are memories that are living from the past inside us in the present, and finding that connection. So that's another important axis. Okay. So, you might think about if a practice along this axis would be something about, like, if your inner child had a voice, what might it be saying right now, right? How might you respond to that child if you had the voice of a kind, compassionate adult? So the kind, compassionate adult would be kind of the voice of the present, kind of reaching into the past, kind of trying to connect to the inner child. Okay. So those are, at least that's one kind of, those are three axes that I think are really important in terms of understanding kind of how to orient in the field of embodiment: the vertical axis, the horizontal axis, and the chronological axis. Okay, so it kind of helps to kind of put this whole kind of unwieldy field into different compartments. Okay, but the other thing that I'm going to just put forward is this notion of the Gestalt cycle of experience as a unifying thread, and we'll look at a number of different modalities, and just show how a lot of this pattern seems to be common throughout so many of them. Okay, and I'll just put forward a kind of an invitation to see in whatever practice you use or choose, whether this may be present for you. So let's see. Oh, how about the use of biological interventions, drugs, diet, etc.? Are these considered bottom up? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, biological interventions. So I think, yeah, that would probably be considered kind of, I guess, several things. Like, so probably bottom up, right? So kind of biological interventions, drugs, and diet. Yeah, that would be kind of something that you're taking into your body, right? Hopefully shifting kind of your bodily chemistry and kind of creating a sense of feeling good inside, so that once you start to feel good, feeling good and thinking that you're good are actually really quite linked. It's easier to think that you're good when you feel good, right? When your diet is good, when your biochemistry is good, like, so all of those things. So that would be kind of you'd start with kind of feeling it in your body by tending to your body through biological kind of interventions, right? Yeah, okay. And then, and then that might result in thinking good, right? So as you feel, so you think, right? Okay. So, if there are any questions, please ask them. So, is this kind of making sense? It sounds like it's making sense to people. So hopefully it's. I don't know if it's too advanced or too rudimentary, but okay, you're doing good. Okay, great. Yeah, I have to peek over the side for the chat. Okay, Jess Wright says Goldilocks. Okay, yes, it's making sense. Julie Martin, I think I know you. Anyways, hi. So here's the Gestalt cycle of experience. Here's the notion, like, this is how we interact with the world, right? Kind of, and it's just how we make contact with anything, with our inner experience, with our outer experience. And this thread seems to flow throughout lots of different somatic modalities, like lots of different embodiment practices. So we'll just go over it here. So So first, the notion is we start at rest. We start kind of in a state of withdrawal. Okay, we're kind of at equilibrium, and then we start to sense something. Right, we go from withdrawal to sensation. Right, and we might start to sense, hey, as I'm sensing things, I'm noticing maybe some dryness in my mouth, and I'm thinking, gosh, I've become aware that my mouth is dry and I need some water. So there's kind of sensation, then there's awareness, and there's mobilization of energy. Because as I'm feeling the dryness in my mouth, I'm kind of like, okay, I need to go do something about this sensation, right? So energy gets mobilized, and then I take action. I'll go grab some water. And then, so I'll go to maybe the sink and I'll get the water in a cup, and then I will put the water into my mouth, and it will be a point of contact. I'll make contact with the object of desire, right? So there'll be sensation, dry mouth, mobilization towards action, and then contact with the thing that's desired, the object. And then I will drink that, I will assimilate it, and then it will integrate into my body, right? And then once I've drunk the water to completion, I will feel satiated, and then I will withdraw again into equilibrium. Okay? So that's kind of just one cycle with water. You could do it kind of with things that you have an attraction towards, or also things that you have an aversion towards, right? Like suppose there was a lawnmower that was kind of outside my window. So as I just sitting at peace, and then I hear this loud noise, that's a sensation that I hear, okay? And as I listen to it and I become aware of it, I become mobilized into action. So there's this impulse to move, right? And the action that I want to do is I want to close the window so that the sound is not bothering me. Okay, so I do that. I make contact with the window. I take action so that kind of the window gets closed, and then now it's peaceful again, right? And then I kind of can assimilate the newfound sense of peace and just integrate that into my being, and I'm at rest again, and I can withdraw. Okay, so that's kind of at least the Gestalt cycle of experience. Now I'm going to just link this with maybe about 4 different somatic embodiment practices, just to show you how this kind of works. So let's see. So there's somebody named Ruella Frank who maybe is as well known than Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. This Ruella does it from a more psychotherapeutic perspective as opposed to a body education perspective. But basically, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and Ruella Frank came up with 5 or 6, depending on kind of how you count, but fundamental movement patterns. Okay, and these are the notion of yield, push, reach, grasp, pull, and release. Okay, so these are kind of motions that babies go through, kind of growing up. First, a baby learns to yield, learns to be held, to let itself be held, and just settle into being held, right? So that's kind of like almost yielding into pure sensation, just letting sensation come, right? And then a baby learns to push. So it first learns to yield, just yield into sensation, learns to push. If you want, you can do this alone, maybe kind of you can just imagine yourself yielding into your chair, right? Or wherever you are, just feeling yourself supported and yielding, right? You can also imagine pushing off of it. So a baby next learns to push, right? To push away, to differentiate, to separate, right? So that's kind of like energy gets mobilized. It feels, okay, it's yielded, it's safe enough, right? It's held enough. And then it's okay to push. It's okay to push away and off, okay? And then it goes to reach, right? So a baby yields, it pushes, and then it reaches for something, okay? So settling in, yield, push, pushing off of a parent, perhaps pushing off of the floor, and then reaching for something, reaching for a toy or something that it sees, right? And it reaches and then it grasps it, right? Then it pulls it towards itself, and then it releases and lets go, okay? So this whole sequence of yielding into just pure being, right, to the support that's underneath you, okay? Letting yourself then find something where you want to push off into and then reach for something, grasp it, pull it, and then release, right? So this is kind of a very common kind of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, Ruella Frank model of kind of things. And it really kind of maps well onto the Gestalt cycle of experience of just kind of sensation, mobilization, contact, yielding, pushing, reaching, grasping, pulling, and then releasing. So this is kind of a common thread, okay? Some of you have probably kind of done the Gabriel Roth 5 rhythms. I know that, let's see, yes, I see the comment there, so I'm just wanting to respond. So it's an arbitrary point to start at rest. I think you're right. It is continuous. That is true. That's a very good point. So thanks for making that. Yeah, I think kind of equilibrium, we think of equilibrium as perhaps our natural starting point, but maybe it's not. So yeah, good point. Okay. So the Roth 5 rhythms. So, you know, Gabriel Roth was actually told by Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt, to go do dance her way, like to do Gestalt her way. And so she went ahead and did it. And she came up with the 5 rhythms, and they follow kind of this Gestalt cycle of experience. So this notion of flow, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. Flow being just listening to kind of an almost sensation-wise absorbing what is, being receptive and in flow, right? And then finding your push, finding your staccato, finding your desire to move into action, right? And then chaos being that point where you're actually in deep contact with something, right? Where you're actually finding the thing that you're wanting, the moment of ecstatic release, kind of that's maps to ecstasy, right? And then lyrical being kind of coming back from that, right? This period of assimilation and integration, and then coming back into stillness, okay? So that's the Roth 5 rhythms. There's Anna Halprin's 5-part life art process, okay? So this also maps onto this, right? So this is a particular process where people it's also a dance process where people identify some unfinished business in their life. So they sense into their life and their being, and they draw an image that represents kind of their feeling of what's unfinished in their life. So it's a very kind of sensation-oriented process, right? And they're invited to dance the confrontation of the image, right? That whatever the unfinished business is, whether it's kind of the dragon that haunts them or the demon that they need to do battle with. But there's a confrontation moment, right? So it's first they identify the challenge, and then they confront it. And there's a release, and then there's a change, and then assimilation again. So that's kind of another very similar model, okay? And this is from the trauma literature kind of container. This is sensory motor psychotherapy, Pat Ogden and Janina Fisher's work. So kind of again, there's this process of just finding the resources. So this is typically just kind of when you're at rest, kind of just shoring yourself up for the journey, getting ready to go into accessing the difficult traumatic content, right? Kind of so you're first just being in stillness, and then you're getting ready to kind of enter into the challenging work, the accessing, Okay. And then you're in contact with that. Then you're processing it. Then you're in the period of transformation, and then you're integrating. Okay. So all of these, this is just a model that kind of unifies all of these different kind of approaches in a way that hopefully helps things hang together. So that's that's the model. So I thought that we might do a little practice. Let's see. So let me just cut off that slideshow. Hold on. Stop share. All right. Hi. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for kind of listening in. I know that I want to give you guys an experience that hopefully kind of helps this hang together. So so I'm going to invite you to come along with me on a particular guided imagery, right? And we're going to use kind of both kind of your physiological imagination. So it's a kind of a bottom-up approach, right? You're listening to me, so it's also kind of my guidance. So there's some kind of top-down coming in. It's an outside-in, me guiding you, and then there'll be some inside-out as you share, right? But I want you to imagine maybe kind of going on a little walk, and as you're walking along, you see a little child, okay, and that child, seems maybe a little bit young, maybe a little bit too young to be by themselves, and they seem lost and alone. And as you approach them, you feel a desire to comfort that child, and imagine yourself comforting that child and letting that child know that they're safe. And what would you do? What would you say to that child? How would you connect with that child? What would you tell that child? How would you love that child? Right? And just imagine yourself doing that, kind of with that child, kind of telling that child all the things that it needs to hear, or all the things that that child needs to have support around. So just inviting you to do that. Yeah. So just letting that image kind of be with you for a moment. And go ahead and thank that child and let that child kind of be on its way. And now I want you to imagine it's kind of another day, and maybe you're walking along and you see a child. And again, this is a child, and they seem young and lost and alone. And as you approach this child, you can see that they're crying, and they feel maybe a bit sad. Okay, and then they reach their arms out for you, and as the child lifts their head, you realize that that child is you. That this child is you at a younger age, right? And I just want you to let yourself imagine the feeling that comes inside you and what you might say or do to or with this child. What would you say to the child? How would you love that child? Right? What would the child need to say, and what would you say to them? Right? And see if you can feel this from the inside, right? Just feel it kind of in your whole body and being, right? Just the gentleness, the loving kindness, right? Yeah. Yeah. And so just letting yourself notice, right, what you are doing with the child, what you're telling the child, how you're loving that child. Okay. And there's a way, perhaps, in which the child had some thoughts or beliefs about themselves that maybe were wrong or incorrect, right? Maybe the child thought certain things. Maybe the child felt like nobody was there for them, or that they had to do it all themselves, or that they didn't belong or they didn't deserve, right? So just notice kind of whatever messages that child might have received. And then I want you to let yourself tell that child or think, the messages that you wish that that child had received. What should that child have been told, right? What messages should that child perhaps have been given, right? And so let's take a moment and just feel into that. What messages might that child have been given? And what messages, perhaps, could you give to that child now? Yeah. So, yeah. We'll just spend a little time with this, right? What message did the child get? And what message could the child receive now? What message perhaps should the child have received? Yeah. 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 So yeah, just letting yourself feel this intersection of the past and the present, right? Your present adult, older self, mature self, the self that's capable, loving, the past child that felt whatever it felt, right? Um, and letting that be penetrated in their bodies and in their beings. Okay. Yeah. So we have a little time left, right? And what I'm going to invite us to do, for those of who are interested or want to, is just to share, kind of, if anybody is interested in sharing what came up for them from that experience. And I guess I think what we might do, if people want, and you can type it in, or you can private message me, or you can share kind of here, but just kind of maybe first, maybe we'll speak about the messages that perhaps the child got during, that the child had from its history, right? And then the messages that the child kind of perhaps should have gotten, or kind of you were able to give. So, anybody like to share? Yeah. And it's okay if you don't also. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to do this. It can be challenging. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So a couple things coming through. The child received the message to not be too big, to not be too much. Right. It's a tough message. Yeah. To give, to get. Right. Yeah. I see from that, that being that with the child was too painful. And sometimes that's true. And so you can just be with, okay, it's okay. Just to say to the child, it's okay. It's too, I see that it's too hard to be with you right now. And that's okay. And I can respect that. Okay. That's all right. You got messages the child got that you were not enough. right. Okay. Messages both ways that it's all okay. That's wonderful. So it's good to have those messages too. Yeah. So there's people who are talking about how it was really comforting. Maybe I don't know how the. Oh, I see somebody raised their hand. Maybe we could unmute a person. Is that doable?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I
okay.
can unmute.
Okay. So I think Nat, you've raised your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and let
Yes,
you.
just a minute. I fixed the video, so you can see me too.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Nat. Hi. Yeah.
Hello, Bert. I wanted to share that I know it is a very deep practice. And the
Yeah.
moment I started to drift between windows in the computer, not to be with it completely. It's like
Yeah.
I discovered myself partially unconsciously and partially consciously.
Yeah.
I couldn't immerse myself into the
Yeah.
be with the emotions or to be too close to the child.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's okay. I think that there's sometimes a lot of wisdom, right? Kind of in kind of protecting ourselves. And sometimes we distract ourselves when it's too difficult or too intense. And so I kind of want to honor kind of the part of you that wanted to distract itself. And maybe that's exactly what that child needed. Yeah. So
But it is also an estrangement for the child inside. It feels like I'm
yeah.
estranging. So
Yeah.
on one hand, I don't want to re-traumatize myself
Sure.
now as grown up, but the child is still there, and it feels. I assume it feels neglected,
Yeah. 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 So
ignored.
yeah. So I'll just say one last comment on this, and then just kind of we'll go to other people. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes so this is kind of important relative to just kind of the trauma work, right? That is important to have sufficient resources and containment, kind of prior to kind of making, kind of to embarking on these journeys. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in just kind of going slowly, right? And if kind of your body or being doesn't feel kind of ready to do that, that's totally good and fine also. So just wanting to respect that. Okay. So yeah. So the question is this what we can call completing the Gestalt? And yes, this is very much kind of the completion of the Gestalt, right? So if there were things or needs that didn't get met, as a child, I think that this is one way in which kind of we can finish that unfinished business, right? We can complete the Gestalt ourselves in our time, right? So yeah. So yeah, is there anybody else who kind of I know it felt, I don't know, kind of maybe intimate or kind of touching. I saw some people seemed kind of connected and moved also. So, I think this is the completion of the Gestalt. This is like the full cycle here, right? So you go through making contact kind of with the child, right? Finishing the unfinished business, kind of, and then just integrating and assimilating kind of your new self, right? So it works all the different axes, the past, the present, right? Kind of, if you can feel this fully in your body, that works the vertical axis. And then kind of as you share here, hopefully kind of you can also experience some kind of value from and support from the community here. So yeah, assimilation. You are what you eat. Yeah, that's right. In some ways, what we're doing here is we're feeding ourselves. We're feeding ourselves kind of the nourishment of our own loving kindness and our own loving words, right? So yeah. So how are people doing? I just want to check in on the group. I think that, you know, I just want to see. Okay, people are good. Okay, super good from Rebel. So smile, smile. Yeah. Okay, thumbs up, thumbs up. All right. So, well, you know, I think this is, I guess the thing that I wanted to mostly close with, I guess I have one last slide. Mm, but maybe I'll just, let's see, I can figure this out again. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Jody. I appreciate that. So this was the quote that I wanted to end with. In part because, you know, I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with the conference myself. But the quote is, has it ever occurred to you that 100 pianos, all tuned to the same fork, are automatically tuned to each other? All tuned to the same fork are automatically tuned to each other. They are of one accord by being tuned not to each other, but to another standard to which each one must individually bow, right? So, yeah, it's, I guess the idea here is that, you know, we all have many different paths, right? There's many different modalities that you've been exposed to over the course of this conference, right? And my hope is that there are patterns that you might start to see that run throughout, ways of organizing these things and putting them into one piece so it doesn't feel just all of a mishmash inside. So thanks for being such a great audience and listening. And yeah, I so enjoyed kind of being with you guys.
All right. Thank you, Albert. That was a very great presentation. I really enjoyed that. All right, so I have the standard announcements while you think about your #1 tip for embodiment. So the charity is still going. I haven't checked yet, but I understand Matthew made a wager last night about if Atlas was going to say more than twice, and he did. And if he did make that little error, Matthew is going to donate $200 to the charity. We're not asking that of everybody, but you know, $1 would be nice. Sessions are streaming till December 2nd. Package goes up in price tomorrow. Wow. And hashtag Embodiment Conference 18. Oh, and one more. You want to, yes, if you want to learn more about Albert and his work, somatopia.com. All right, Albert, what is your #1 tip for embodiment?
There we go. Gosh, I think just be gentle. Just be gentle with your body, right? Be gentle, be kind, take your time. It's there, and it'll be present, and it'll keep talking to you. But be gentle, be kind, and keep listening. So I think that's it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being such a great audience, and we'll see you around the conference. Yeah.
All right, I am going to open up everyone's mics. Applause.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, thank you. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being so kind. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we are going to go into the coffee breakouts.